We are live for virtual lunch in the Exhibit Marketers Cafe. Welcome back. I hope everybody had a great summer. It seems like forever since we've been here together. So I want to welcome everybody. And we are officially live on LinkedIn today. We had just one time where we got to be on LinkedIn before we took our summer break. So we are official. We are on LinkedIn as well as YouTube and Facebook. So we probably got people joining in from all over today. I am going to put up the request to tell us where you're joining in from and what you do in the industry. We'll be anxious to hear who's with us here today, but we've got a great guest coming up here in just a little bit. But I want to start out, and as always, for those of you who may be new with us today, we always go through a few news and tidbits and things at the beginning before we get to our guest. And so today I kind of have a little bit of a theme going on with the headlines that I'm going to share. I guess you could say it's the what maybe you could have done for your summer vacation. So it's some interesting different little tidbits that I picked up from around the web. And I want you to just pay attention as we go through, because all of these things could have, or most of these things could have some applications that you could think about incorporating into your next trade show or event. So as always, Alan, my husband, is behind the scenes. He's going to put up the links as we go along in LinkedIn. If you are joining us on YouTube, the links are already there. If you click the read more button in the description, you can see all the links, but don't go now. You can go check them out later. But the first one that I want to share is, we all grew up knowing about the Wienermobile, the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. And so it made the tour. Hopefully you've had a chance to see it at some point in time. But they did something fun last month. They had in, I think it was 4 cities. Yeah, New York, Chicago, Atlanta, and LA. They partnered with Lyft. So when you would call for a Lyft driver, you might get to ride in the Wienermobile. So I think that was a really clever idea. Looks like we've got some people here. So we got Mike Glavin is here, says hi, Kenji and everyone. And then here is, looks like Alan is just LinkedIn user today, but there's the link for the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile article. But where I'm going with this one is I've seen some exhibitors and sponsors do this where they provide a shuttle ride from the airport. So that's an option of something creative that you can do to get some attention. I see Lance is here from Park City, Utah. We're going to talk a lot about Utah today. All right. So let's see. Next up is, in the theme of branded travel, or brands and travel, I guess, KFC did a pop-up hotel, a themed hotel room this summer as well. For 11 days in August, they had a KFC branded hotel room, and they had, instead of check-in, it was called Chick-in. And they had an arcade, what do I want to say? An arcade game, in the room. And they had a button that you could press to get your chicken ordered. And so anyway, again, just creative ideas of what could you do to really show off your brand in a creative and fun and different kind of way, as you're thinking about being a sponsor or being an exhibitor coming up at events. Andy is here from sunny San Diego. And we're just flying in here. We've got Kyle from Leavenworth, Washington. Arlene is here from TSNN. And Dave is here from Mount Airy, North Carolina. So we got people from all over the place here today. So, all right, let's see. Next up is an underwater museum that opened in Cyprus. And it's, you really have to go check out the link for this one. It is all these sculptures, underwater sculptures. And so divers can go down and just swim around and explore these sculptures. It's just really, really cool. 130 sculptures, actually. So there's a lot there, and they've got a lot of pictures on the website. So We'll put that up as soon as it pops up here. Let's see, we've got, I'm going to try to get this one right, hopefully. Pei Xuan Lee from Bay Area, California. Michael is here from Chico, California. We got a heavy West Coast contingent. I'm betting because we've got a lot of the outdoor fans here for Kenji. Here's that link for that underwater museum. It's really cool, and it's really different. And so just thinking about, different kinds of ways, and now obviously you're not going to have an underwater exhibit unless maybe that's something Kenji has planned down the road for the big gear show. But, thinking about just how could you showcase things in a different way. The next one is also a very different kind. This one is not a trade show exhibit, but this is more of an exhibit experiential event. We talked earlier this summer about the Imaginarium that opened in Atlanta. Well, this one is called The Infinite, and it's in partnership with NASA. And they used footage that had been filmed on the International Space Station. And so it's a VR experience. So you actually wear the goggles, but it's multisensory, full immersion. You get to feel like you are on the International Space Station. And so it's just really cool. I see Victoria is here from Santa Rosa, California. There is the link for the Infinite Multisensory exhibit. But again, there's some videos on this link, so you can go and check that out. But it's just an amazing experience. And we talked a lot at Virtual Lunch about VR and AR and how you can incorporate some of those things into your exhibit. So, not that you're going to do anything on the scale of this, this NASA project, but, look at what could you do to make your booth more multi-experiential. Stacy is here from Atlanta. Hi, Stacy. Good to see you here. All right. And then on another experiential note, in Vegas, where better to have multi-experiential exhibits or activities. Vegas is opening, I believe this fall, the Flyover. And so this is a ride, but it's kind of like if you ever went to one of the Omnisphere, the domes where you went and you got to experience the full immersion projection. It's kind of like that. And it's called the Wild West Flyover. And so you literally feel like you're a bird or you're in a helicopter or something. You get to fly over and see all these scenes from the Wild West. So anyway, it's an amazing experience. Again, this is a video that you can go and watch. We'll put that up in just a minute. But, I get the thumbs down. I guess there must be something wrong with that link. So anyway, I will share that later so that you have an opportunity to go check that out. Or you can Google Wild West Flyover Vegas. I'm sure you'll find it that way. All right, let's see. A couple of things that I want to share as far as industry type news. Hey, this is fun. Ray Bear is here from Atchison, Kansas. Hey, great to see you, Ray. All right. So a couple of things industry-wise. This one actually, and I haven't seen Al pop up here yet, our friend Al McCarroll from New Jersey, but Al shared this one. It's 9 questions for event professionals to consider going forward because, and you've been hearing me say this for a long time, this was the whole theme and the whole idea of doing Spark this summer was reimagining and reinventing. And you're going to hear a lot about that from Kenji about how to reimagine an event. But these are 9 questions for event professionals to consider going forward. So how might we approach events in an entirely new way? And it's a great list of questions. So I will put that link up. So again, thanks to Al for sharing that. If you're here with us or if you're watching on the replay, thanks. We always appreciate tips from our viewers. And on the subject of Spark, let me take that down. On the subject of Spark, we have coming up next week, we're going to We're going to do an encore. We're calling it Spark Imagination. It's going to be a brainstorming session where we get together and have a virtual brainstorming about how to reimagine and reinvent. So you can still get in on that. There's the link for you, exhibitmarketerscafe.com/spark. And you can go still get registration and join us. And then you'll also have access to all of the replays from Spark, including our first interview that we did with Kenji. He was part of our list of speakers at Spark. So anyway, so there's that. And then also on the subject of Spark, one of our sponsors at Spark was Ovani Productions. And so I really want to highlight something from them because it's so cool. If you haven't seen this, they do 360 virtual tours of exhibits. So this is an example, and Alan's going to put up that link here. Okay, I'll watch for that. But this is a 360 view. So you can click on all those little dots and it'll pop up information about the products. And this was Thule, again, keeping with our theme today of outdoor gear, right? So this is Thule and the exhibit that Ovani put together for them. So there is the link. Now, I know this is a really crazy long link, but again, these links, if you're watching on LinkedIn, these links are popping up. And if you are on YouTube, they are in the See More. So anyway, but yeah, so there, it's a really cool thing. So I encourage you to go take that little virtual tour, play around a little bit and explore what they can do. But they've got a lot of other examples as well. All right, let's see. What else do we have? Oh, the trade show job board. This has been put together by several different industry associations. So if you are looking for employees or if you are someone who is still looking for a job in the industry, go ahead and check that out. And here is the link for that. So you can check that out and find out what kinds of jobs are out there. And then just one other quick thing that I want to put up here is to let everybody know that, remind you that if you haven't already, we have the Exhibit Marketers Cafe community, which is like our own private social media community. And so you can get in there and you can that's where we have all of our replays from Spark. And we've got lots of other things, tools and trainings and just lots of cool things. So, too many tabs here that I have to flip through. So anyway, and I think Alan will put that up, but it's exhibitmarketerscafe.com/community. So you can go check that out. So I want to bring on our guest today because Kenji's got a lot of great things to share. We're going to get some behind the scenes, maybe even a little bit of a sneak peek of next year. But I want to give just a real quick introduction for Kenji. Kenji Haroutunian is a business event strategist and organizer with focus and expertise on the interconnections of the global outdoor recreation industry ecosystem. He served as vice president of Nielsen Emerald Expositions and at the outdoor retailer shows from 2007 to 2014. His current projects include building the California Outdoor Recreation Partners, a business coalition for the state, and leading business development for the Big Gear Show and for the Outdoor Media Summit, in addition to operating his own successful agency of Kenji Consults. So, Kenji, welcome to Virtual Lunch.
Thanks for having me, Marlis.
Well, I'm excited because it was so fun talking with you during Spark and getting all of these great behind the scenes of how the event was coming together. But for those who may not have been able to join us for Spark, can you give us just a little bit of kind of a background of what the Big Gear Show was all about, how it was structured, and how it was different?
Sure. So the Big Gear Show came out of a show called Paddle Sports Retailer that had been going for about 4 or 5 years. Due to some changes with the outdoor retailer platform, which had been happening, it moved dates into a window that the paddle industry didn't feel great about. So they launched their own event, and it traveled to Madison, and it traveled to a few other cities, Oklahoma City, and was great. And this happens, I've seen this happen in other sectors in the industry, where there's a great feeling of camaraderie and togetherness, but it's a little bit small. It didn't create enough gravitational pull, for example, to draw media from outside the paddle world. So the idea was to expand it out to kind of invite in relevant categories. At the same time, there was this rising movement of experiential, which you've talked about a couple times. I'm going to probably beat it into the ground because I think it's one of the major trends for this decade and maybe beyond, is that people do want to really have experiences, and that bar has been lifted even during the pandemic. So the idea to expand out, include other categories, was first recognized at PSR. In the meantime, the outdoor industry had moved and really focused, at least at the outdoor retailer shows, around lifestyle categories, which really do drive a lot of the profitability in retail stores. And there are many, many brands that only play in that field. So that has a specific time and method that's really connected to the global fashion industry, and fast fashion and apparel. So with that came this sort of opportunity for hard goods and gear. Gear and hard goods are slightly different in my mind anyway. But anyway, the products that get people outdoors has really been the emphasis to drive participation, to drive excitement among the public on what's coming and what's going to help my comfort level or my experience be better when I go out hiking, climbing, biking, paddling, whatever it is I'm going to be doing in the outdoors. And then, so as this came around, they invited me to join the team. And at the same time, this was actually really early in 2020, the pandemic started to rise up. And so that affects, of course, the entire events industry. And, luckily we had a very small team. And so the idea of pivoting to and changing some of the methods and approaches we had was relatively easy. We didn't have a giant ship to turn. It was, a startup essentially. So how do we modify this event and make it work for the market needs today? And that's kind of what every show needs to be thinking about these days, is being nimble on your feet and being able to change, listen carefully, and plot a path forward that fits what the market needs now. And that may be different in 2 weeks or 2 months. So being nimble is key. So anyway, that's how it started anyway. And the idea was to bring bike and paddle and outdoor together for the first time.
Well, and you were originally scheduled to start up last year, and you were going to be a little bit more of a traditional show where you were going to actually be held at a convention center. But then when you shifted things, you just kind of blew up the blueprint and just started over. So I think the three key things that I think are so unique about the Big Gear Show was venue, the experiential, like you mentioned earlier, and then you had a subsidy idea, a structure. So if you could kind of tell us a little bit more about those three things. And I'm going to actually put up, here's some of the headlines. I mean, the media coming out of this, the response that people had was just phenomenal. So you can see there, you can see a picture of what it looked like. But just that you can see, pulls off a successful invitation only event, Big Gear Show debut wins on quality over quantity. So talk a little bit about how you had the whole event structured.
Sure. And back to your idea, yes, it did start as a more conventional, I'll use that term, show. Although every day of the show would offer demo opportunities, even if in the original concept. One of the beauties of the venue is that it's even in the convention center in Salt Lake City, access to the testing venues, whether that's on mountains or on water or on trails or in campgrounds, is really close by. Like it's almost unique, I would say, in the country. Although there are other places, but it's really, really great to be able to come into an international airport, have a really nice large convention center and have access to the experiential testing grounds. So even with Outdoor Retailer back in the day when it was in Salt Lake, there would be these field demo days that preceded the show, and then the show would 100% take place in the convention center. So that the model that we had with the Big Year Show was a little different than that from the beginning. So it was an easy pivot, relatively easy pivot, to move it all outdoors. In fact, Lance and I, two of the key members on the team, I guess I'd say, had already produced several events up at Deer Valley Resort where we staged the Big Gear Show. So we knew the terrain and the people up there really well. They were very accommodating, and they trusted us that we knew what we were doing. And so the wheels had been greased already with the outdoor press camps and the dealer camps that had happened earlier in the 2010s, we'll say.
Yeah.
And then so the two other points that you had brought up were, help me remember that,
well, the venue that you chose, and then the structure of how it was a curated experience, and you also offered incentives, I guess we could say, for the attendees.
Yeah, good point. And the curation is really an important term, and it has to do with how we built this incentive or the subsidy program, which is something short of a hosted buyer platform, but something more than a invite to come in, but you're going to pay your whole way. And I think that's part of the model that is changing in the trade show world. Is this, in my experience, is that the curated events that are more focused, that are bringing a specific audience with a specific goal in mind, are doing better across the country, whether they're regional or they're a national show, but they're focused on a very specific category, for example, like rock climbing. So I think that is a direction of the future. For us, the challenge is that we're still calling ourselves a trade show. We're still seen that way, but we're trying not to kind of throw the doors open and have this measurement be based on how many people attended. We really from the beginning, we're working to create this qualitative difference so that the people who are coming had a specific goal in mind. They're specifically qualified to attend, and we weren't opening the doors, especially during a pandemic year, to just a large number of people with a very broad mission. Some are coming to sell to the exhibitors. Some are coming to look for jobs. Some are coming to talk about partnerships as an advocacy organization, for example. So lots and lots of different kinds of business get done at trade shows. The idea of curating and creating a focused event kind of pushes back against that, and, for example, creates this feeling like, oh, well, we're at a trade show, but it doesn't feel like buzzing and busy like a trade show does. And then the last thing you mentioned was a subsidy, and that is something we built in because part of the equation that we feel needs to get changed in the trade show world is who's paying for it, how much are they paying, and what are the levers of value for the attendees, for the exhibitors, and for the rest of the sort of ecosystem. Another overused word that I like to use, but there's a lot more to an industry than those that are in the supply chain. I'll just say that.
Well, and so tell us the numbers, what we're talking about, because it was a highly curated, people had to apply to attend. So how many did you have, exhibitors and attendees? What were your numbers like?
Well, our goals were to have 250 exhibitors and 500 retailers. And what we ended up with was 206 brands, 140 exhibits with 206 brands, and 421 retailers, and about 71 working media. Those are the raw numbers. We did say no to a lot of people. We were under a pandemic a guideline or regulation with Summit County and the city and the venue. So we really couldn't actually throw the doors open if we wanted to, at least, and play by the rules of the gatherings, even though it was 100% outdoors and a different kind of event where we're much more spread out.
Well, but what I think is so cool, because you look at those numbers, it was basically 2-to-1 exhibitors and attendees. It's like, it's so, I can imagine it was a much more, just kind of more like a kind of hanging out and everybody chatting, and not so much that busy racing through the show floor kind of feeling. Victoria has a couple of questions here. So what metrics changed to evaluate the qualitative success versus attendance numbers?
That's a great question, because that strikes at the essence of kind of how the model we're trying to change here is, not to use metrics like overall attendance, or density of human beings per square foot. We are, and at the same time, we're trying to create a different model of measurement going forward. So, what would be a qualitative aspect? Well, how many decision makers did you talk to? How many people that you talked to at this show were owners or senior management versus kind of more line level folks or staff? And we have metrics on all that. In the surveys that we did after, that have pretty much been completed now, we measured what the appetite was for different aspects of the show, including the open air venue, the value of having these cross categories put together. Like, what did the attendees, the retailers and exhibitors, think of this, and what do they value? What do they think is important versus how we performed against those? So there are metrics around all of that. And then lastly, I'd say, knowing your audience intimately is really important. And I think that my experience in the show business is that in the past, show management have been really focused on being show producers, effective show organizers who that is their expertise. But that now needs to be added to an expertise on the specific market that you're serving, and insights and opportunities and changes that are happening in that market, which is happening in every market right now, not just because of the pandemic, but because of this thing called the internet, because of this emphasis on experience versus sort of a more tactical or order writing or cost per appointment calculations. So I think the answer to the question is that it's still forming up what the metrics are. How do you do qualitative metrics that are meaningful? Besides talking about things like vibe, which that's a really important thing. That's what people leave with, and it shapes their opinion about whether they want to come back next time or not.
That's true. Yeah. And you can't attach numbers to that exactly, but it's definitely, as we saw from the media that came out of the Big Gear show. I mean, the vibe was definitely positive. Victoria is also asking, I think we need to just clarify real quick. I know the answer to this, but the difference between exhibitor and retailer.
Yeah, great question. Because really, who isn't a retailer these days? If you're doing direct to consumer, a retailer in our definition is a shop, probably has a brick and mortar presence, multiple shop storefronts maybe, but bike shops, paddle liveries, climbing gyms are now retailers oftentimes because they sell products. So it's a storefront, and the exhibitors in our world are manufacturers of products looking to sell through wholesale to these retail shops.
And your retailers are your audience or your attendees. Your exhibitors are the brands that are selling to the retailers.
Right. Yeah.
So it is a little bit confusing in the terminology just for this particular show. So a couple of things I loved. I saw the quote somewhere in some of the media, the term experiential wonderland. And I thought that was so great, because it was, like you said, you had planned on doing the demos all along, but here it was like you just walk across the parking lot and do a demo. It wasn't like you had to transport all of your attendees somewhere. So it streamlined everything. So what kinds of things were you hearing from your exhibitors about how they were interacting with the attendees, and then the response that they were getting from people?
Yeah, interesting question, because I've produced, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 different demos up in the Wasatch Range at 10 different venues, both summer and winter, for the outdoor retailer shows. And so I know that demo thing pretty intimately. But what was interesting is that the outdoor group, who was a large part of the show, which also had bike and paddle, which are also represented pretty well. Different kinds of companies are more used to demoing than others. For example, bike companies are very, very used to it. Like there are events, almost every bike event that happens is built around the idea of, hey, get on this bike, throw your leg over and try it. And whether it's a mountain bike or an e-bike or a gravel bike or a road bike, that's kind of what you do. When you go in a bike shop, it's even similar. Like they'll let you ride it outside, and, even here in dangerous streets of LA, but I think, and some of the outdoor brands were a little bit like, you want to try it? They weren't expecting maybe that as much with companies, because we were all outdoors, and a lot of things indoors you can't test. Like you can't light a fire in a camp, in a open fire, setup. Like that's just not allowed indoors. But out on the tarmac at Deer Valley Resort, we were easily able to do that. So stove companies and companies that did grills and fire pans and all that were able to do it. Let's see, what else? Paddle sports is also a category that's very used to being able to demo. Like you're not going to buy a boat from a manufacturer unless you've actually paddled it, or a stand-up board. And so it's a regular part of the buying process, whereas in some categories in outdoor, it's not as used to it. So I think as we iterate through future big gear shows, that will become a bigger and bigger part of the platform as people get used to it. Oh, we can test things. It's sometimes not clear that you can.
Yeah. Well, and I loved a quote from our interview that you did for Spark. You said you wanted to focus on the people and products and less about the fancy presentation. So, I love that it really was. It was all about, demoing and trying out the products and experiencing things. So what surprised you? I'm guessing there were probably a lot of, because the way you were structured and the financial aspect, that you had probably a lot of startups or smaller companies that participated. Anything that surprised you as far as maybe who was exhibiting or who was attending, or or just things that were not what you expected?
I think first of all, yes, one of the things that none of the media really talked about, and maybe it's because they weren't privy to it or that's just not something they're interested to report on, but the affordability of the big gear show is something of note. I mean, we are far less expensive than the other shows. And because, this taps back into that sort of the one-upsmanship, I guess I would call it, of brands in a show setting. Once as a show gets longer along its arc of existence, the players kind of step up their game and they're competing with each other. They're competing for the interest or attention of investors. And so these sort of palatial presentations start to build up. And with the big gear show, we really wanted to kind of like detune that a bit. And let's get back to kind of like what's important here. And that is getting people excited about participating in outdoor rec. And that means telling the stories of the gear and the products and making the connections with the people, and a little bit less about kind of the just elaborate presence of a platform. And in the outdoors, it's kind of hard to do that. Although one of the surprises is that several companies did bring like real booths. They had I&D companies. They came in. They had people setting it up, and they were well-designed booths. They were not, they would have been fine indoors, but they were made to withstand any kind of weather elements that might come, which, good. This was another surprise, is that we got really good weather. We split the gap between the storm tracks that were coming through the Rockies at that time, which had been going for a week. And then the smoke factor, which was, just came in literally the morning after we were done. We just threaded the needle on that one.
Wow.
We know that in the future, there's going to be weather events, but we're the outdoor industry and we know how to handle, a little bit of weather.
Right. Well, real quick before we wrap up, anything as far as lessons learned or something that I know we're only a month past your show, so things aren't really set for next year, but anything that you learned from this year that you're going to implement or try differently or wish you'd done differently this year?
Well, yeah, the first lesson is, don't have a pandemic. That's a really important lesson. So whoever's in charge of that, I'd really request that of you. No, but seriously, I think for us, I think investing in operations support, that was something we're going to do more of. And this had a lot to do with the pandemic. We lost a couple key players to quarantine and COVID. Not lost them. I didn't mean to get too dramatic, but they, couldn't travel.
Right.
And so we had to scramble a bit. And I think in general, just having stronger support there, having content ready, the beauty of having staged this is I don't have to say anymore, close your eyes and imagine this. I can actually show you. Here's the image. Here's some video. Here's, but that's, I think, having more content, is really important. People want to see, especially when you're doing something different. They have to see what they're getting into. I think, and over communicating is the third thing I would say is you can't communicate enough to, especially again, if you're trying to do something different or new, you've just got to, be okay bombarding people with information until they cry uncle a little bit. Like, look, this is the third time this week you've sent me this message. Oh yes, sorry about that. I'd rather apologize for over communicating. I think that's something we want to do better as we go forward.
Well, and that is so true because, like you said, it's hard to get everybody to see your vision of what this event is going to be. And now you don't have to try to explain that so much anymore. You can actually just share that with them and they can get the excitement and the vibe, like you said earlier, and feel that for themselves. So Kenji, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I've been following the Big Gear Show ever since your news releases first came out a couple of years ago that you were putting this together because I knew it was going to be innovative. So I really want to say thank you and how much we appreciate having you on Virtual Lunch to come back and share your experiences like this. And we wish you so much success for next year. And I'm going to be continuing to follow, and I know other people are too. So keep up the great work, Kenji.
Well, thanks, Marlis. Appreciate you giving me a little attention over here and following the Big Gear Show. It's something I'm excited for too.
All right. Well, we will be back for Virtual Lunch in 2 weeks. We'll have another special guest. So I want to invite everybody to come back and join us again. Same time, same place. And we will see you then. Bye, everyone.